Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review. Yeah, Buke and Gase, General Dome. Buke and Gase is a musical duo from New York. I believe this is their second full-length LP, and I will most sure for certainly definitely be the first to admit that for quite a while, I mean I guess since their debut LP, I've always kind of dismissed this project. Not publicly, but you know, sort of personally, thinking that maybe they were a little too enthralled with their homemade instruments to the point where they would name their musical project after them. That sort of thing just kind of screams the word gimmick to me, and despite the fact that they may have been able to conjure some semi-unique sounds with the instruments that they made, you know, ultimately the question comes up, is there as much attention being paid toward the music and the songwriting? That was my perception. That was sort of my attitude toward their first album, but I gave this new LP of theirs an honest-to-God shot and was pleasantly surprised, because I think what I ended up finding on this LP was a lot of improvement and just a lot of appeal. For one, the production, the sound, the overall sound recording on this LP is loads better. No longer does Buke and Gase sound, I guess, as tattered and sort of worn as their homemade setup is, kind of strung together with maybe a little bit of tape, some screws, and some daisy-chained effects pedals. And what's kind of come through in the process of maybe me giving them a better try and just hearing a better recording is that these guys have essentially kind of revealed themselves as being a pretty unique and interesting noise pop project. They just have this really strong sense of eccentricity, a penchant for kind of very strange angular melodies, a lot like Deerhoof, maybe not in the same exact way, but the way that they write melodies, the way they just come out so sharp. There are also moments where just the tone and the dissonance and just the strangeness, the chaos, kind of reminds me of like Mikachu and the Shapes without the British swagger or sort of post-punk influence. And there are other moments on here where I'm sort of feeling a really strong Dirty Projectors kind of vibe coming especially from the guitar riffs and lines and melodies. There isn't really kind of that virtuous flash from the playing that you would usually get on a Dirty Projectors record, but the melodies and just the writing on this album are no less dizzying and maze-like. Buke and Gase's kind of idiosyncratic approach toward writing melodies and structuring songs with kind of one phase after another, but yet it all kind of comes together in verses and choruses, is so damn impenetrable, and yet it's so kind of odd and just sharp sounding overall that I can't help but pay attention to it. It is attention demanding. Aside from maybe like the soft interlude in the middle of Contortion and Training, very little about this LP actually comes off as being smooth. One track after another, you're getting all these staccato guitar riffs and leads that sort of hammer away mechanically. Right underneath Aaron Dyer's, I'll use this word again, very sharp feminine voice. It's got a nice twang to it, I guess. Not a southern twang, but it's like, you know, got a really kind of it just kind of hangs in this certain pitch range that, again, a lot like the guitars, is just kind of sitting in this register where you can't help but pay attention to it. It is like unignorable, which may be annoying to some people, especially if they're kind of maybe looking for music that will help them chill out, relax. This is very much not in that mood. To me, this new Buke and Gase LP instead is more like an imaginative crossroad between sort of like the hard-hitting and just straight rigid sounds of industrial combined with just stomping, hollering, hootenanny party attitude, especially on the track HICCUP, which has all these kind of thumping drums on it, a lot of dissonant background guitar play, some bassy and patient guitar riffs, which are just kind of laying a nice solid rhythmic foundation. As have a very kind of grinding, just sandpaper rough quality to them. Buke and Gase definitely conjure up a very dense array of sounds for just two people with you know, some homemade instruments. The title track on this thing is just guitar noises upon guitar noises with this riff, and over that are all these weird leads and just kind of freak outs. And when they kind of kick in with these thick strummed chords that are just so freaking dissonant on top of this, it's like this downward spiral into just sour tones. There are these swaths of just chromatically ascending guitar leads on the track Twisting the Lasso of Truth, which totally earns its freaking title, and it just feels like this insanely maniacal take on like circus music. However, my one issue with the track is that it doesn't really develop past the climax of this one really good musical idea that it presents. And there are a few other tracks on here, like the closing track 2, that do kind of feel like that. Like Buke and Gase are more interested in kind of doing this weird experiment than they are actually kind of crafting a song. But most of the time on this album, in their own weird little way, Buke and Gase are bringing some catchy, melodic, weirdly melodic, verse, chorus, verse tracks that kind of sound like an old airplane engine on its last leg, topped with guitar leads that just kind of burn their way into my eardrums, mainly on the track Hard Times. Now, there is a nice sense of variety among these tracks. I don't really get that kind of album arc or just sort of an obvious progression or anything like that, especially with 2 strangely placed interlude tracks. But like I said, there are differences in, I guess, sort of feel among these songs. There are slower tracks, faster tracks, denser tracks, more sparse tracks, louder, softer, but nothing on here purely comes off as sweet, straightforward, or basic, which is, you know, also praise, but I guess kind of warning as well for those who may be looking for that kind of thing. Because as fun as this album is to listen to for me, I will admit that to an extent, it does sound kind of samey with the errands kind of relying on, you know, their same instruments over and over. I mean, rarely do they kind of break out of the, I guess, sort of ritual of relying on their Buke and Gase to make these songs kind of work. But, you know, I guess you would figure considering the name of the group. There are moments where keyboards kind of come in, maybe a few gentler guitar tones. There's even a spot on here that really sticks out because it's got auto-tune on it. But, you know, it's not really in the way you usually kind of see auto-tune getting used. These guys take an eccentric approach toward executing with that, just like they do the guitar and bass. So even though this album is a little bit of a gauntlet at a kind of short 42 minutes, I did love listening to it. It is just an odd gift. It's a fun puzzle. It's catchy yet challenging. It's a friendly conundrum. It is a joyous racket. I'm feeling a decent to strong 8 on this album. If you've given it a listen, did you love it? Hate it? Why? And what do you think I should review next? Anthony Fantano, Buke and Gase, forever.